Hey, good evening. I'm Israel Spence. I've been in the engineering and construction field for about 7 years now. Prior United States Marine Corps for 5 years, and I've been looking for a change of pace. And this summer, I found a book on Python coding, and I really wanted to turn that into a new career path. So I found Savvy Coders through the Vet Tech program, and I've been working through that since. But here's my capstone project. Okay, there we are. All right. I selected a data set on Kickstarter, um, and I wanted to understand what are the top attributes of a successful Kickstarter campaign. Uh, if you don't know anything about Kickstarter, it's a public benefit corporation. They provide a funding platform for creative projects. Companies or independent creatives, they'll come and use this crowdfunding platform to try to raise funds for making a new project or a product. Um, in exchange for pledging different levels of the funds, the creators reward the pledgers with the product and then sometimes extras. They usually have a tiered reward system. Um, for example, if they make a CD, at the first level, they'll give you a CD. At the second level, they'll write your name and thank you on the inside. So there's 5 rules to using Kickstarter. The projects need to create something that you can share with others. Uh, the project and the statistics need to be honest and clearly presented. You can't fundraise for charity. You can't sell part of your business, and it can't involve prohibited items, such as certain weapons and that kind of thing. And then about what makes up a successful campaign itself, um, each project can have a set campaign length in days, anywhere from 1 to 90 days, and a set goal amount. Sky's the limit there in US dollars. Um, if the project is fully funded within the time frame, it's considered successful. Kickstarter takes their cut and then sends the rest to the creative project owner. If it's not fully funded within the time frame selected, they consider it failed, and all the pledged money is returned to the people who pledged it. So the data set, I found it from a website called Kaggle. It's a data science website. And, after reading through the description, I really wanted to understand, what makes up the most common attributes of a successful campaign. Um, Before too much, the data set showed around, 34.5% of all of them succeed. So if most of them fail, doctoring our campaigns to hit most of those common attributes could only help us become more successful. So the first thing I did was I pulled the CSV into Excel, and it looks like a big mess because it really is. There's a lot of columns and a lot of extra information that just isn't necessarily helpful for what we're trying to understand here. Um, so the first thing I did was look through it and verify the data types in the columns I wanted to keep. I looked for the presence of nulls or empty and incomplete cells, and then I dropped a bunch of irrelevant columns, like day of the week created, where it might only be helpful in a very specific situation if I wanted to understand how many succeed on Monday, get something like that. And that might not be as impactful as some of the other attributes. So I left that out. And then here we have our code. I'm actually going to pull up my IDE so we can see that. All right. So the first thing I did was I imported regular expressions, copy, numpy, and pandas, and I pulled the CSV into pandas here. And we wanted to check out the column naming convention. And you can see there's a ton of them here, 50 something of them. So we really need to look through and get rid of the extras. So reading through the columns, and I picked out the important ones. We dropped the rest. The next thing I wanted to do was check for null values. So using isNull, adding .sum, it gives you a total, and it goes by column as well, which is really neat. So there's 1,889 nulls in the whole data set, and every single one of them is in the category column. So the next thing we did, checking the category column for types and the naming of those, and they all show up as an NaN, which is not a number or a null value in NumPy. Um, Jumping over to a different thing that needed done as well, the state column shows whether something's the state of the campaign, whether it's failed, successful, canceled, live, or suspended. And, live, canceled, and suspended campaigns, we really can't do anything with them. Live campaigns, we're not really going to know if it's successful or not when the data was pulled. Canceled campaigns and suspended campaigns, we really can't quantify like why they canceled it. And suspended campaigns, they did something, they weren't supposed to. They must have broke a rule or something. So we dropped live, canceled, and suspended campaigns from it, leaving us only failed and successful campaigns in the state column. And the next thing, I made a deep copy so I don't mess up my original data set. And then another column that needed looked at was the create to launch and launch to deadline columns. And these show in days how long each of the campaigns run. And you can see there's a lot of extra numbers here that really could just go. So we used the dot map method and a lambda slice on each of those just to drop all that extra information, just so we're left with the days. And back to needing to replace all the NaN values. I did see in the source URL column, every single time that category was missing or it had a null value in a row, the source URL column had the following information in the URL column. It had, the percentage sign 20, which is a space in a URL. So I copied the information from the source URL column into the category column for each row where it happened by row using, combine first. And then individually, one at a time, using, regular expressions, every instance of electronic music within a category, I had that replaced with electronic music. Country and folk music, same thing. Video games. Every single one was ran through and replaced for a much better naming convention. And then at the end, just double checking ourselves to seeing how it looks, and everything looks great. It's all readable now. And then after all that, checking for null values, because I'm paranoid, and there's not a single null value anywhere. So we got it all sorted. After that, I dropped the source URL column because we don't need any more information from it. Checking for accurate column drop, everything looks great. Checking to see if category is fixed one more time, and it's beautiful. So the next thing we did was just celebrate and export it and start plotting. So after we have all that, we pulled it into Tableau and really started to plot everything so we can understand it better. And the first one that I came up with is, how long should you run a campaign? This shows the number of successful campaigns against days run. So a successful campaign it's 30 days long, right? So just looking at this, 2,409 out of all of the successful campaigns so far in that time period, they fall in that 30-day window. In the 20 to 40-day window, that's 76% of all successful campaigns fall in there. So really, if you want a successful campaign, make it 30 days, and almost nothing under a week and nothing over 60 days ever succeeds. In that 2009 to 2017 period, 2 or 3 in each of those succeeded. So it really doesn't help you to do that. And then the top successful months, this is another good one. What time of year is the best time to ask people for money? And I plotted these by the count of successful per month. And it really shows here that May, June, and November are the best times of the year to ask for money. Where, December, January, February, that's a really bad time to ask people for money. People are coming into the holidays. It's the dead of winter. You got to worry about your heat bill and that kind of thing. But yeah, just those 3 months, May, June, and November, they hold 30% of the total successful campaigns. So try to launch your campaign in those months. And then top successful countries, it shows green to red for success rate, where green is going to be a more successful country. The top six successful countries are Hong Kong, Luxembourg, the UK, USA, and Ireland, and the percentages are up there respectively, where the lowest 6 are Belgium, Italy, Spain, Austria, and Norway. And one thing that really stuck out is English-speaking nations typically do better on Kickstarter than countries with a lower level of English speakers. So one thing that might be helpful is if your website shows from a domain where English isn't a common language, like a .de or a .fr, it may actually benefit you to use a more common domain name like .com or .org or .net. And then the next one I have is percentiles by category. Uh, Really helpful here. If you're in the 80th percentile, you're at least a 62% successful. Um, the median hangs out around 40% successful. And the 20th percentile, really, they're all 0%, or in this case, web's right in there too. It's 8%. They really don't succeed at all in the 20th percentile. One thing to note is blues, comedies, and shorts. We'll see later on that there was a relatively low number of these campaigns done in that entire time frame. So they might say 100% of them are done, but that's only for the small amount that actually gets sent into Kickstarter. And then top successful by category, video games is predominantly a successful category, 85+%. And then again, blues, comedies, and shorts always do good. Most of the categories are going to fall between 38 and 60% success rate. Academic, classical music, electronic dance music, film video places, thriller movies and web series, they're typically failures. So they show 0%, but that's that's only because I had to reduce the decimal points down further. There was a couple that were successful, but really they don't do well. Web software and flight, they're typically less than 20% successful as well. And here's what I like to call the staff pick effect. So Kickstarter has this thing called projects we love. And when a project is selected by a staff member, it ends up on the front page. And I wanted to see what effect that had on a specific category. And you can see it's rather telling. The effect of being selected by the staff pick, the majority of the categories enjoy an 80+% chance of success after being a staff pick. Where before that, the median and average of most categories is hanging out around 40%. You can see fabrication and tools, where are we at here? Fabrication and tools, it had a 52% increase in success rate. Web had a whopping 48% chance of success by being selected as a staff pick. So how do you become a staff pick? Kickstarter has a whole blog on it. And they're listed right here. Start with a strong idea, express it clearly, choose a compelling project image. Don't, put essential information first, and make sure you're showing off your project. Don't just tell us about your project. Show the rewards, show what kind of great stuff you're going to give the people that are pledging to you. And remember your audience and don't spam. Then the next one I got is the top earners. So you can see every category has its own average of the goals and its own average of how much is actually pledged. If you remember back, academic typically does really bad. We're hanging out close to 0% successful. The typical goal, how much they ask for, is around $20,000, and they typically only get $153. Electronic dance music is another one. You make an album and you want to ask people for $400 to $300, and you might get $200 on average. But there are a couple categories that typically do well. Camera equipment, the average goals for around $40,000, and they typically get around $90,000. And the video games as well, that's another one that's great. The average goal is $60,000, and they average around $92,000. So, every category has a different level of fervor with what people are willing to put out and what kind of products they're excited for. Space exploration, I had to exclude that from this because it was just so bad. It skewed the entire graph here. The typical ask was something like 800,000 on average, where they only get 70,000 pledged. So that's not even shown here. And then over here, top successful by count. Over that 2009 to 2017 period, this shows the top category by sheer numbers, how many campaigns were successful within each of those categories. In the bottom right, it doesn't show because of the screen size, but makerspaces, fabrication tools, shorts, country, folk music, blues, and comedy. And if you remember, blues and comedy were 100% successful, but in that 8-year period, only 18 campaigns were blues and only one was comedy. So you can take that how you want. Uh, but this is helpful to help realize, your market saturation within your category. How many people are you going to be fighting against for those pledges? And then the average pledge by category is also kind of important. And it's not necessarily as impactful to the success of the campaign, but it's very important to know when you're deciding on how much to ask for. So what's shown is average backer to pledged amount. How much does each backer shell out on average? And back to video games, on average, every backer will give around $41. The average campaign is $90,000, so that's around 2,000 backers that you have to get to agree to back your campaign. Where fabrication tools, on the other hand, the average is 45,000, but the average backer is putting out $444. That's only an average of 101 backers. So deeper pockets there, people more willing to put out big dollar amounts. So every category is going to be different. So that's a good thing to know when you're trying to decide on how much to ask for and how many people you need to reach to become successful. And the number two most important thing for a successful campaign, what else is important beyond these things? Your product or the service itself is, of course, going to be one of the most important things in a successful campaign. A great idea is going to be it's going to be the most impactful thing for generating buzz, shares on social media, the total amount of backers that are going to pledge, and your total dollar amount at the end. Exciting ideas are going to succeed more than something that's, people just don't think is fun or it doesn't interest them. And then the number one most important thing, you have to start your campaign. Even if your project doesn't fall in line with a top earner or a top category, you can't succeed if you don't ever start. So don't look through this and decide, well, every single academic campaign fails. Well, that's not necessarily true. Perhaps it's how much they're asking or what product they're trying to have created. Look at stuff like that and make sure you at least start your campaign. Wayne Gretzky here, he's famous for this quote, but you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. So start your campaigns. And just to recap, the most successful campaigns have these attributes in common. They're 30 days long. They're launched in May, June, or November. They typically launch from a country with a high acceptance of the English language or a common website domain. They don't over ask too far past the average pledge for the category. Um, they're not an academic, a classical music, EDM, film and video, places, or web series category. They're a staff pick that really has a huge effect on becoming successful, and they have a great product. So these are all important things to remember. But looking forward, the COVID lockdowns in 2020, they likely had an adverse impact on overall pledge amounts, and then here we are in 2022, moving to 2023, rampant inflation all over the world. Things are crazy everywhere. Those may also adversely affect pledge levels. And analytics is a continuous effort, and historical performance might not always reflect future performance, but you'll never know until you try. So, take these attributes that are helpful to become successful and use those. And that's the end of my project. So thank you for listening in today.